The river was wide and unhurried, stretching beyond sight like a long breath held gently by the earth. Its surface reflected the pale morning sky, a soft blend of silver and blue, barely disturbed except by the slow movement of water against the wooden hull. A lone man sat in a small boat, his hands resting lightly on the oars, allowing the current to guide him forward. At first glance, everything appeared peaceful. The man had chosen this journey deliberately. He had risen before dawn, leaving behind the noise of the village and the unspoken weight of daily obligations. He told himself he needed silence, space, clarity. The river, he believed, would offer him all three. Water had always felt honest to him, flowing without argument, moving without resentment, accepting every stone and fallen leaf without complaint. As the boat drifted, he closed his eyes for a moment and listened. The sound of water brushing against wood, the distant call of birds waking in the reeds, the subtle rhythm of his own breathing. There was no urgency here, no one to impress, no task to complete. The river did not ask him who he was, what he had achieved, or what he still lacked. It simply carried him. In this stillness, he felt something close to contentment. His thoughts slowed, at least on the surface. The endless inner commentary that usually filled his days, plans, worries, regrets, softened into a low murmur. He noticed how rare this was. Even in moments labeled as rest, his mind was often tense, bracing for the next problem, replaying old conversations, rehearsing future defenses. But here, surrounded by water and sky, those mental habits seemed distant, almost irrelevant. He told himself, this is peace. The boat moved steadily, the current gentle but sure. He guided it only when necessary, correcting direction with minimal effort. Each stroke of the oar was slow and measured, as if he feared disturbing the quiet. He felt proud of his restraint, of his ability to remain calm, composed, balanced. He had worked hard to cultivate this image of himself. Friends often described him as patient, reasonable, slow to anger. He believed this, too. Compared to others, he rarely raised his voice. He avoided open conflict when he could. When frustration arose, he preferred to withdraw rather than confront. To him, this felt like wisdom. As the river curved gently to the left, sunlight began to break through the morning mist. The water shimmered, alive with movement yet undisturbed. Watching it, he reflected on how much of life he had spent seeking this very feeling: smoothness, predictability, a sense of being carried rather than pushed. And yet, beneath the calm, something subtle lingered. A tightness he barely noticed, a readiness, like a guard standing just out of sight. He was relaxed, but not entirely at ease. The truth was this peace depended on conditions. Silence, solitude, control, as long as nothing interfered. No sudden noise, no unexpected obstacle. He could maintain this serene state. The river, so far, had cooperated beautifully. He leaned back slightly, letting the oars rest. The boat glided forward on its own. In this moment, he felt almost enlightened, as if he had risen above the chaos that troubled others. He thought of arguments he had avoided, situations he had handled calmly, people whose emotional outbursts he quietly judged. They let things get to them, he thought. I do not. The river seemed to agree, flowing smoothly beneath him. But Zen teachings often begin this way, not with turmoil, but with comfort, not with obvious suffering, but with subtle self-deception. For the most dangerous illusions are not the ones born of pain, but those born of apparent peace. As the boat drifted onward, the man remained unaware that his calm was untested, that the river, like life itself, had not yet revealed its deeper lesson. He mistook the absence of disturbance for mastery. He believed still water reflected a still mind. He did not yet see that his tranquility was fragile, dependent on the world behaving as he wished it to behave. The current carried him past tall grasses and overhanging branches. The river narrowed slightly, guiding boats closer together when others were present. he noticed another vessel far ahead, barely visible through the morning haze. It did not concern him. There was space enough for everyone, he thought. Again, a subtle assumption. As minutes passed, he continued to drift, immersed in the sense of being separate from struggle. The river had become a mirror for how he wished to see himself. Composed, gentle, untouched by turbulence. Yet Zen masters often say that the true state of the mind is not revealed in isolation, but in contact. Peace discovered alone may feel profound, but it is incomplete. Only when the world presses against us. Unexpectedly, unfairly, do we see what truly lives within. At this point in the journey, the man knew none of this. He sat comfortably in his boat, carried by the illusion that calm surroundings equaled inner freedom. He believed conflict was something external, caused by other people, other boats, other minds. The river remained quiet, and in that quiet, the seeds of the lesson waited. For soon, something would interrupt this smooth passage. Something small, seemingly insignificant. A moment so ordinary it could be overlooked, yet powerful enough to expose the truth about anger, identity, and the silent conflicts carried inside every human heart. The river flowed on, patient and indifferent, and the man, drifting on calm waters, believed he was at peace. The first sign of disturbance was not sound, but resistance. The boat slowed, just slightly at first, barely enough to register as anything more than a change in the river's mood. The man opened his eyes and felt the subtle drag beneath him, the current no longer carrying him with the same effortless grace. Before he could form a thought, the wooden hull shuddered. Thump! The impact was not violent, yet it was unmistakable. The boat lurched sideways, the calm surface of the river breaking into ripples that spread outward in widening circles. Water splashed lightly over the edge, cool against his skin. His body reacted before his mind. Muscles tensed, breath caught, hands tightened around the oars. "What?" he muttered, already sitting upright, eyes scanning the water ahead. Another boat had drifted into his path. It was close now, too close. Its bow pressed against the side of his own vessel, wood against wood, disrupting the smooth, forward motion he had taken for granted just moments before. The river, once open and accommodating, suddenly felt narrow and crowded. A sharp wave of irritation rose in his chest. His peaceful morning had been interrupted. For an instant, he said nothing. He assessed the situation, judging angles, distance, cause. But the mind does not remain neutral for long. It seeks meaning, and meaning quickly becomes blame. "Watch where you're going," he called out, his voice louder than necessary. There was no reply. He frowned, irritation deepening into something hotter. He glanced up and down the river, searching for the person responsible. The other boat drifted lazily, its movement careless, uncoordinated, an insult to the order he had so carefully maintained. His thoughts accelerated. Who drifts like this? So irresponsible. Some people have no awareness of others at all. He pushed against the oars, trying to free his boat, but the contact persisted. The gentle rhythm of the river was gone, replaced by friction and resistance. Each small adjustment seemed to require effort now. Anger found its voice. "Are you asleep?" he shouted, leaning forward. "Pay attention." Still no answer. The silence did not calm him. It provoked him further. In the absence of a response, his mind supplied its own narrative. He imagined a careless stranger, indifferent to others, perhaps smug in their disregard. The story felt convincing, almost satisfying. It gave shape to his irritation, a target for his frustration. He felt wronged. Moments ago, he had been at peace. Now his heart beat faster. Heat spread through his chest and neck. His jaw tightened. The river no longer looked beautiful. It felt obstructive, complicit in the offense. Why does this always happen? He thought. Just when things are going well, someone ruins it. This belief settled quickly, comfortably, an old companion. The idea that harmony was fragile, constantly threatened by the actions of others. That peace required protection. He leaned out, glaring at the other boat, preparing another rebuke. His mind rehearsed sharp words, each one justified, each one rooted in the certainty that he had been wronged. But beneath the anger was something more vulnerable. The interruption had shattered his illusion of control. He had believed himself master of his experience, calmly navigating the river of life. The collision reminded him, suddenly and uncomfortably, that he was not alone. That the world did not revolve around his rhythm or his preferences. This realization was intolerable. So the anger grew. It grew in the space between expectation and reality, between how the morning should have unfolded and how it now was. The peaceful river had become a battlefield of small injustices. He tugged harder on the oars, bumping the other boat again in his agitation. Unbelievable, he muttered. No consideration at all. In his mind, the unseen other was already guilty, not just of carelessness, but of disrespect. This was no longer about boats. It was about being seen, acknowledged, validated. The Zen masters say anger is born when the world refuses to obey our script. The man, though unaware of this teaching, embodied it fully in that moment. His suffering was not caused by the collision itself, but by the story he told about it. A collision meant an offender. An offender meant injustice. Injustice demanded reaction. The river carried both boats forward, locked together briefly in their unwanted intimacy. Time seemed to stretch. Each second without a response felt like further provocation. At least apologize, he thought. At least admit your mistake. Silence answered him again. His anger sharpened, now tinged with humiliation. To be ignored was worse than to be opposed. His earlier sense of superiority, the quiet pride in his calm nature, began to crack. So much for being peaceful, a voice inside sneered. The thought irritated him even more. He did not yet see the irony. That the anger he felt so righteous, so justified, was rising entirely within him, independent of any confirmed intention from the other boat. He had not seen a face, had not heard a word, and yet his inner world was in turmoil. The river had not changed. Only his relationship to it had. Eventually, the current shifted. The boats separated naturally, the pressure easing as suddenly as it had begun. His vessel glided free, drifting once more on open water. But the calm did not return. The ripples spread across the surface, long after the contact had ended. And within him, the disturbance lingered even more stubbornly. His breathing remained shallow. His thoughts replayed the moment again and again, each repetition reinforcing the sense of offense. He glanced back at the other boat, expecting to see someone rowing away without remorse. That was when he noticed something strange. The boat seemed empty. No movement, no figure, no hands on the oars. For a moment, his mind resisted the observation, clinging to its narrative. But the image remained unchanged. The boat drifted freely, guided only by the current, just as his own had been earlier. There was no one there. The anger, mid-flight, suddenly had nowhere to land. The river flowed on, indifferent as ever. And the man sat in his boat, heart still racing, face warm with emotion, confronted by a collision that had shaken him deeply, yet had come from no one at all. The impact had passed, but the real collision had just begun, between his assumptions and reality, between his self-image and the truth waiting to be seen. For several long moments, the man did not move. The river continued its slow, indifferent flow, carrying both boats onward as if nothing unusual had occurred. The empty boat drifted ahead, silent and unburdened, while his own remained suspended in a strange stillness, not of peace, but of confusion. His eyes stayed fixed on the vacant hull. Empty. No careless stranger. No rude offender. No one to blame. And yet, the anger was still there. It pulsed in his chest like a living thing, warm and restless. His jaw remained tight. His hands, still gripping the oars, ached slightly from the tension he had not yet released. The realization that the other boat was empty did not immediately dissolve his fury. Instead, it exposed something far more unsettling. If there was no one there, then why was he still angry? This question unsettled him more than the collision itself. He had expected relief, embarrassment perhaps, even a quiet laugh at his own overreaction. But the anger clung stubbornly, like smoke lingering in a room long after the fire had gone out. He turned inward, almost unwillingly, and began to observe what was happening inside. The thoughts were still racing. My peace was ruined. I was enjoying that moment. It shouldn't have happened. Each thought arose automatically, as if rehearsed many times before in different forms. The object had changed from a person to an empty boat, but the pattern remained exactly the same. The mind, he realized dimly, did not need an enemy to create conflict. It only needed resistance. He exhaled sharply, trying to shake off the feeling. But the breath did not soften him. It carried frustration with it, a subtle resentment toward the river, toward chance, toward the simple fact that events did not align with his expectations. He noticed something else now. Beneath the anger was fear. Not fear of danger, but fear of disruption. The collision had reminded him how fragile his sense of control really was. A single, random moment, an empty boat drifting without intention, had been enough to pull him out of calm and into turmoil. This realization felt deeply uncomfortable. So, this is all it takes? He thought. Is my peace really this dependent? The Zen teachings speak of anger as a reaction of the ego when its imagined authority is challenged. The man did not know these words, but he felt their truth unfolding within him. His anger was not about harm or loss. It was about violation of his plan, his mood, his carefully constructed inner state. He had believed his calm was a personal achievement, something earned, something stable. The collision revealed that it was conditional, resting on the assumption that nothing unexpected would occur. And life, as the river quietly demonstrated, never agrees to such terms. The more he reflected, the more layers of the anger revealed themselves. There was irritation at the interruption, then indignation at being inconvenienced, then wounded pride at how quickly he had reacted. Each layer fed the next, forming a complex knot of emotion that no longer required an external cause. The empty boat had simply acted as a trigger, awakening something that had been waiting just beneath the surface. He remembered other moments, arguments that had escalated over small misunderstandings, harsh words spoken before knowing the full story, judgments formed in seconds, defended for years. How often had he collided with empty boats in human form, situations where intent was unclear, yet blame was assigned instantly? How often had he carried anger long after the cause had vanished? The river offered no answers. It flowed on, steady and silent. He became aware now of how his body participated in anger. The shallow breathing, the tightening shoulders, the subtle forward lean, as if preparing for confrontation even when no opponent existed. Anger was not just a thought. It was an entire posture toward the world. And this posture, he saw, was exhausting. Slowly, reluctantly, he loosened his grip on the oars. His fingers tingled as sensation returned. The act felt symbolic, though he could not yet name why. Releasing the oars did not stop the boat, but it softened his stance. He allowed himself to sit back. In that moment, another realization surfaced, quiet but profound. The anger had risen before certainty. He had been angry before knowing whether someone was responsible, before understanding the situation, before reality had a chance to reveal itself. The mind, it seemed, preferred assumption to uncertainty. It would rather invent an enemy than sit with not knowing. This insight unsettled him deeply. If anger did not require facts, if it did not require intent, then it was not a response to the world at all. It was a habit, a reflex, a conditioned movement of the mind towards separation. The Zen masters say that when anger arises, the eye hardens. The man felt this now. During the collision, his sense of self had grown rigid and defensive. I was disturbed. I was wronged. I deserve better. These thoughts formed a boundary between him and the world, isolating him within his own reactions. The empty boat had done nothing, yet his inner world had been thrown into chaos. He looked again at the drifting vessel ahead. It moved freely, unconcerned, guided only by the river. It did not resist the current. It did not demand clarity or apology. It simply floated. A strange contrast emerged. The empty boat was empty and therefore at peace. He was full of thoughts, expectations, identities, and therefore disturbed. This contrast lingered in his mind. He realized now that anger often survives even after its cause is disproven, that it feeds on the mind's insistence on being right, on preserving a story in which the self is central and justified. Letting go of anger, then, was not about correcting facts. It was about releasing identity. This was far more difficult. As the river widened again, the space around him felt different, not threatening, but exposed. Without the anger to cling to, he felt vulnerable. The question returned, quietly but insistently. If the conflict was not outside me, where was it? The answer was uncomfortable, yet undeniable. It was inside, in his expectations of how life should unfold, in his need for uninterrupted calm, in his belief that peace was something to defend rather than something to embody. The collision had not created anger. It had revealed it. This understanding did not erase the feeling instantly. Anger does not vanish just because it is seen, but something fundamental had shifted. He was no longer lost inside it. He was witnessing it. And in that witnessing, a small space opened. A space between stimulus and reaction. Between the river's movement and his response to it. In Zen, this space is everything. The man remained seated, allowing the river to carry him forward once more. The surface was calm again, but he no longer mistook it for inner mastery. He knew now that true calm was not the absence of disturbance, but the absence of resistance. The empty boat drifted farther away, eventually blending into the landscape until it was indistinguishable from the river itself. The lesson, however, stayed close. Anger, he understood now, did not need an enemy. It only needed an ego that believed the world owed its smooth passage. And the river, patient, flowing, uncompromising, would continue to offer opportunities to see this truth again and again until it was fully understood. The conflict had never been on the water. It had always been within. The man leaned forward slowly, as if any sudden movement might disturb the fragile clarity beginning to form inside him. The empty boat drifted just ahead now, close enough for him to study its details. Its wooden planks were weathered, pale in places where years of sun and water had worn them smooth. One or lay across the middle, loosely balanced, shifting slightly with each gentle ripple. There were no ropes pulled tight by human hands, no footprints, no signs of recent effort. Nothing about the boat suggested intention. It was simply there, drifting, exactly as his own boat had been drifting before the collision. He felt a faint, unexpected sensation, almost like embarrassment, though quieter and deeper. Not the sharp embarrassment of being caught in a mistake, but the subtle discomfort of seeing oneself clearly for the first time. He had been so certain, so ready to accuse, so quick to assume meaning. Yet reality, now revealed, was almost disappointingly simple. No one had meant to disturb him. The mind resisted this simplicity at first. It searched for hidden explanations, as minds often do. Perhaps someone had jumped into the water, it suggested. Perhaps the person was hiding. But even as these thoughts arose, they dissolved. The stillness of the boat offered no support for such stories. The truth stood quietly before him. There had never been an enemy. The river widened again, opening into a broader stretch where the current slowed. The empty boat turned slightly, its side now facing him fully. He could see how light it was, how easily it responded to the water's movement. It did not fight the current. It did not steer against it. It yielded completely, and in yielding, it moved without conflict. He felt something soften inside his chest. The realization was not dramatic. There was no sudden enlightenment, no overwhelming surge of insight. Instead, there was a gentle unraveling, a loosening of the tight narrative he had constructed moments earlier. He replayed the collision in his mind, but this time without the story layered on top of it. Boat meets boat, would touch his wood. Water shifts, nothing more. Stripped of interpretation, the event was almost neutral. A simple interaction of objects within a flowing system. The suffering had come later, born from thought, not from impact. This understanding felt unsettling and liberating at the same time. If suffering arose so easily from interpretation, then peace, too, might be closer than he had believed. Not something to achieve through perfect conditions, but something revealed when conditions were seen clearly. He noticed now how his body had begun to relax without conscious effort. His shoulders lowered slightly. His breathing deepened. The heat in his face faded. These changes did not come from forcing calm, but from the absence of fuel for anger. Without a target, the fire could not sustain itself. The Zen masters speak of seeing things as they are. The man felt this teaching come alive in that moment. Not as philosophy, but as direct experience. Seeing the boat as empty changed everything. Not because the boat had changed, but because his mind had stopped projecting. He realized how rarely he truly looked. Most of the time, he saw through layers of expectation, memory, and assumption. People appeared not as they were, but as roles in his inner stories, offenders, allies, obstacles, threats. Events arrived already labeled, filtered through fear or desire. The empty boat, however, refused to cooperate with such habits. It offered no personality, no intention, no explanation. It was just wood and water. And in that simplicity, it dismantled an entire emotional reaction that had felt so real, so justified only moments before. He allowed the silence to deepen. The river made no comment on his insight. It did not reward him with approval or punish him for misunderstanding. It simply flowed, carrying both boats along the same path. He wondered how many conflicts in his life had followed this same pattern. A sharp word overheard, a delayed response, a misunderstood gesture. How often had he reacted before looking closely? How often had he collided with situations that were, in essence, empty boats, events without personal intent, yet filled them with meaning drawn from his own fears and expectations? The question lingered, heavy and honest. Looking closer, he saw another layer. Even now, part of him wanted to congratulate himself. At least I noticed, that voice whispered. At least I am aware. He smiled faintly at this thought, recognizing it for what it was, the ego's subtle attempt to reclaim control, to turn insight into identity. He let that thought pass. The boat drifted nearer still, the two vessels moving almost side by side now. For a brief moment, their paths aligned perfectly. They traveled together, neither leading nor following. Both surrendered to the same current. In that alignment, something shifted again. He saw that the empty boat was not just a symbol of others. It was a mirror. It reflected his own state earlier, drifting without full awareness, assuming peace while untested, moving through the world without realizing how easily he could collide with the unexpected. The difference was not between him and the boat. It was between awareness and unawareness. The boat was empty of self. He was full of it. And that fullness of opinions, expectations, and silent demands was the true source of friction. He felt a quiet humility settle over him. Not the humiliation of being wrong, but the humility of seeing how little control he truly had. The river did not bend to his preferences. Boats drifted, events occurred, and his reactions, automatic, rehearsed, deeply conditioned, rose to meet them. The practice, he realized, was not to control the river. It was to observe a mind that resisted it. The empty boat began to drift away, pulled gently by a subtle change in current. Its presence faded gradually, not abruptly, as if allowing him time to absorb the lesson it carried without words. He watched it go. As it moved farther away, he noticed how different his attention felt now. Earlier, his gaze had been sharp, aggressive, searching for fault. Now it was soft, curious, open. The same object had produced two entirely different inner worlds. This realization stayed with him. The mind creates enemies where none exist. It fills empty boats with imagined offenders. It suffers not because of what happens, but because of what it assumes. The Zen story did not end with blame dissolved or anger erased forever. It ended with seeing clearly without haste, seeing before reacting, seeing emptiness where the mind habitually insists on form. The man sat quietly as the river carried him onward once more. The calm that returned now felt different from the calm he had known earlier. It was not the calm of isolation or control. It was the calm of understanding, a calm that did not depend on perfect conditions. He knew the river would present more collisions, more interruptions, more moments when expectations would be challenged. But something essential had changed. Next time, perhaps, he would look closer first, not at the world, but at the mind that rushes to fill it. The river had returned to its quiet rhythm, yet the man felt anything but settled. The empty boat was now several lengths ahead, drifting steadily, its presence no longer intrusive, but strangely intimate. It occupied his awareness more deeply than any shouting stranger could have. A person could be blamed, argued with, dismissed, but this absence left him nowhere to direct what still stirred inside. His anger had lost its object, and without an object, it revealed its true nature. He noticed that although his thoughts had slowed, the emotional residue remained. The tightness in his chest softened, but did not disappear. The echo of irritation lingered, like a vibration in the body long after a sound has faded. This puzzled him. He had uncovered the truth of the situation. There was no offender, no malice, no negligence, and yet something inside him still resisted. He realized then that anger does not dissolve simply because it is proven unnecessary. Anger is not logical. It is habitual. It arises from patterns carved deep into the mind, reinforced by years of reacting the same way to disruption. The boat was empty, but the anger was not. This insight unsettled him. He had always believed anger required justification. Someone must have crossed a line. Something must have gone wrong. A wrongdoer was necessary to validate the emotion. Without one, anger should vanish, or so he had assumed. But here it was, alive and restless, unsupported by facts. He felt exposed. Without a target, the anger turned inward. It no longer rushed outward in accusation, but circled within him, searching for something to attach to. It questioned him now, silently but persistently. Why do you need the world to be smooth? Why must the river obey your sense of order? Were you protecting? These questions did not arrive as words at first. They came as sensations, unease, vulnerability, a subtle discomfort with not knowing what to do next. His mind, so accustomed to reacting outward, struggled to remain present with this inward turning. He shifted in his seat, uncomfortable. For a moment, he considered distracting himself. He could focus on steering, on adjusting his course, on anything that would restore the familiar sense of control. But something held him back. A quiet awareness suggested that this moment, this targetless anger, was important. So he stayed. He watched. He observed how anger, when deprived of an enemy, revealed itself as energy without direction, a kind of raw intensity, born not of hatred, but of resistance to what is. It was the mind's refusal to accept interruption, randomness, uncertainty. The Zen teachings describe anger as fire. Fire needs fuel. Normally, blame provides that fuel. But here, the fire burned briefly on its own reserves, then began to weaken. He felt it. As he did not feed it with new stories, it slowly lost its strength. This surprised him. He had always believed that anger had to be confronted, suppressed, or released through expression. He had never considered that it could simply be allowed to exhaust itself, if left without narrative. The empty boat continued ahead, silent and indifferent. It did not demand resolution. It did not explain itself. It simply existed, free of intention. And in its silence, it offered him a radical invitation to sit with anger without acting on it. This was difficult. The mind searched again for meaning. It tried to transform the experience into a lesson he could own, an insight he could claim. This is growth, it whispered. This is awareness. He noticed this impulse too, and let it pass. He was beginning to see how endlessly the mind creates something out of nothing. The anger shifted again. Without a target, it softened into sadness. Not dramatic sadness, but a quiet recognition of how often he had suffered unnecessarily. How many moments of peace he had lost to imagined offenses. How many relationships had been strained by reactions formed before understanding. This sadness did not hurt. It felt honest. He realized now that anger often protects something fragile inside. A fear of being powerless, unseen, insignificant. The collision had reminded him that he was not in control, that his tranquility depended on factors beyond him. Anger had rushed in to defend against that discomfort. But now, with no one to fight, the defense felt unnecessary. He let his shoulders drop fully. His breath deepened. For the first time since the collision, his body felt truly present. The river widened again, opening into a broad expanse where the water slowed almost to stillness. The empty boat drifted farther away, its form becoming less distinct. Soon, it would disappear entirely, merging with the landscape. He felt a strange gratitude toward it. Not because it had behaved well, but because it had revealed something essential. He saw clearly now that most conflicts do not begin with others. They begin with expectation, with a subtle demand that reality align with our inner preferences. When it does not, anger rushes in, not because harm was done, but because control was lost. This realization was both humbling and freeing. If anger required an enemy, then peace required perfect conditions. But if anger could arise without an enemy, then peace, too, might exist without control. Perhaps peace was not something to protect, but something to uncover beneath the layers of reaction. He reflected on past conflicts again, but this time with gentler eyes. Arguments that had escalated when intentions were misunderstood. Resentments held long after explanations were given. Silences that grew heavy because neither side could admit uncertainty. How many of those moments, he wondered, were collisions with empty boats? Situations where no harm was intended. Words spoken without malice. Events shaped by chance rather than choice. Yet his mind had filled them with enemies. He felt no urge now to condemn himself for this pattern. Judgment would only create another target. Instead, there was a quiet acceptance. This was how the untrained mind worked. This was not a personal failure, but a human habit. The Zen path, he sensed, was not about becoming flawless. It was about becoming aware. Aware enough to pause. Aware enough to look. Aware enough to see emptiness before assigning blame. The anger had nearly faded now. What remained was clarity and a subtle vulnerability. Without anger's armor, he felt open, unguarded. The river did not promise smooth passage ahead. More collisions might come. He would not always remember this moment. But something had shifted. He understood now that anger without a target is an invitation. An invitation to turn inward, to examine the assumptions that quietly govern the mind. It asks not who is at fault, but what expectation was violated. The river flowed on, unconcerned with his realizations. The empty boat finally drifted out of sight, absorbed by distance and light. Yet its lesson remained steady and clear. Most conflicts are not encounters with others. They are encounters with our own resistance. And when there is no one to blame, the truth becomes impossible to avoid. The conflict was never on the river. It was always inside him. Silence settled around the man. Not the comfortable silence he had sought that morning, but a deeper, more demanding stillness. The river moved without sound beyond its soft, continuous whisper. No voices echoed across the water. No accusations lingered in the air. The empty boat had vanished from sight, yet its presence remained unmistakable, like a question that refused to be answered too quickly. He drifted, not just physically but inwardly. For the first time since setting out on the river, he was no longer narrating his experience. There was no commentary about peace or disturbance. no attempt to define what had happened or what it meant. Something in him had grown quiet, not forced into silence, but gently stilled by understanding. This was the silent teaching. It did not arrive as words. It did not explain itself. It did not demand belief. It simply revealed. He realized that everything essential had already occurred. The collision, the anger, the discovery of emptiness, the fading of blame. Nothing more needed to happen. And yet, this moment, this quiet afterward, felt like the true beginning. The Zen masters say that the deepest teachings are wordless, that truth cannot be fully grasped by thought, only experienced when a mind stops interfering. The man felt this now. Any attempt to analyze further felt unnecessary, even disruptive. So he did nothing. He allowed the river to carry him. The absence of reaction felt unfamiliar at first. His mind had been trained to respond, to judge, to adjust. Stillness felt like neglecting a duty. But gradually, he sensed that this non-response was not indifference. It was trust. Trust in the unfolding of experience without control. He noticed how the river did not rush to correct its course after the collision. It had not paused to assign meaning. It had not resisted the boat's touching. It had simply continued, integrating the disturbance into its flow. In this, the river became his teacher. It showed him that disturbance does not have to become conflict. That contact does not require opposition. That movement can continue without narrative. He felt a subtle shift in how he understood himself. Before, he had seen himself as the one who navigated life, steering, correcting, maintaining balance. Now, he sensed that much of life navigated itself, and his interference often created more friction than clarity. The silence allowed memories to surface, not as regrets, but as reflections. Moments when he had reacted instantly, convinced of his righteousness. Moments when words spoken in anger could not be taken back. Moments when relationships cooled not because of what happened, but because of how quickly blame had formed. In each memory, he now saw the same pattern, an empty boat filled with imagined intention. He felt no need to relive these moments emotionally. The silence did not reopen wounds. It illuminated them gently, without judgment. This, too, was part of the teaching. Understanding did not require self-punishment, only honesty. He became aware of how exhausting it had been to constantly guard his peace, to monitor the world for potential threats to his calm, to believe that serenity depended on others behaving correctly. The silence revealed the cost of this vigilance. It also revealed an alternative. Peace, he saw now, was not something to be defended. It was something that remained when resistance was absent, when a mind did not rush to label, accuse, or protect itself. This peace was quieter than pleasure, less dramatic than relief. It did not announce itself. It simply was. He noticed how spacious his awareness felt. Sounds came and went without pulling him. Sensations arose without demand. Even thoughts appeared, floated briefly, and dissolved on their own. He did not cling to this state. Clinging, he sensed, would break it. The silent teaching did not say, "This is how you should always be." It said, "This is possible." And that was enough. The man understood now why Zen stories were often so simple. A monk raises a finger. A master sweeps the floor. A boat drifts empty down a river. These stories were not meant to instruct the intellect. They were meant to interrupt it. The empty boat had interrupted his certainty. The silence interrupted his need to explain. What remained was direct seeing. He saw that anger was not an enemy to be destroyed. It was a messenger. It pointed toward attachment. Attachment to control, to expectation, to a fixed sense of self. When a message was received, the messenger no longer needed to shout. The river bent gently, guiding him into another stretch of open water. The sun climbed higher now, warming his skin. He felt fully present, not because he was trying to be, but because there was nothing pulling him elsewhere. He wondered briefly how this understanding would translate back into the world of people, schedules, and responsibilities. The thought arose, then passed. The silent teaching did not concern itself with future application. It trusted that clarity would express itself naturally. He understood now that wisdom was not about storing insights. It was about seeing clearly in each moment. The river did not remember the collision. It did not anticipate the next one. It responded fully to what was here. So could he. He placed the oars gently in the water and guided the boat just enough to stay aligned with the current. The movement was effortless, cooperative rather than controlling. This, too, felt like part of the lesson. Action without aggression, direction without force. He sensed that the silent teaching would not always be accessible. There would be days when anger rose quickly, when assumptions returned, when the mind filled empty boats without hesitation. This understanding did not make him immune, but made him aware. And awareness, he now saw, was freedom's quiet beginning. The river flowed on, unconcerned with enlightenment or failure. It carried leaves, reflections, shadows, everything equally. The man flowed with it, not as a master of his experience, but as a participant in it. The silence deepened once more. And within that silence, without effort or declaration, something essential settled into place. The lesson had been given, not in words, not in doctrine, but in the direct experience of seeing anger arise, lose its target, and dissolve into understanding. The boat moved forward. So did he. As the river carried him onward, the silence that had settled within did not vanish. It changed. It became observant. The man noticed that although the sharp edge of anger had faded, a quieter presence remained, subtle, persistent, almost invisible unless watched closely. It was the presence that had reacted so quickly earlier, the one that had demanded smooth passage and uninterrupted peace. It did not announce itself loudly. It whispered. This was the ego. He had heard the word before, of course. People use it casually, often as an insult. Someone with too much ego was arrogant, selfish, domineering. He had never considered himself such a person. He was reasonable, thoughtful. He listened more than he spoke. Surely ego was something other people struggled with. Yet now, floating quietly on the river, he began to see how mistaken that belief had been. The ego, he realized, was not loud pride. It was identification. It was the silent belief that this experience is about me. He replayed the moment of collision again, but this time he watched not the event, but the inner movement that followed it. The instant resistance arose. The instant sense of being disturbed. The instant assumption that something had gone wrong to him. That reflex had not asked questions. It had not waited for clarity. It had simply asserted a position. I am the one affected. I am the center. The ego had stepped forward. He noticed how naturally it did so, like a reflex built into his perception. The ego did not need encouragement. It did not require conscious choice. It emerged automatically, shaping experience before awareness had time to intervene. This realization was unsettling. If ego was not arrogance, but identification, then it was everywhere. It was present even in moments that appeared humble, calm, or spiritual. Even his earlier sense of being peaceful on the river had carried ego within it. The subtle pride of believing himself above disturbance. I am calm. I am different from those who get angry. These thoughts, now seen clearly, were not peace. They were comparison. In comparison, he saw, was ego wearing a polite mask. The river curved gently again, and he followed it without effort. As the scenery shifted, he turned his attention inward once more, curious rather than critical. What exactly did the ego want? The answer arrived quietly. The ego wanted control, not domination, not power over others, but predictability. It wanted the world to behave in ways that confirmed its assumptions. Smooth water meant I am at ease. Interruption meant something is wrong. The ego, he saw, could not tolerate randomness. It needed narrative, order, explanation. When events did not fit, it rushed to impose meaning, even if that meaning caused suffering. The empty boat had exposed this perfectly. There had been no intention behind the collision, no agent to confront. And yet the ego had reacted as if personally attacked. Why? Because the ego does not respond to reality. It responds to threat. And threat, he now understood, did not require danger, only uncertainty. The man felt a strange mixture of recognition and relief. Recognition because this pattern felt deeply familiar. Relief because seeing it clearly loosened its grip. The ego, once observed, lost some of its authority. He remembered countless small moments from his life, now illuminated by this understanding. Feeling irritated when plans changed unexpectedly. Resentment when messages went unanswered. Discomfort when silence followed his words. None of these moments involved actual harm. They involved disruption of expectation. And in each case, the ego had reacted, insisting that reality correct itself. This should not be happening. They should know better. I deserve clarity. The language of ego was subtle, but unmistakable. He saw now why the Zen masters emphasized humility, not as moral virtue, but as practical wisdom. Humility was not thinking less of oneself. It was thinking less from oneself. It was releasing the belief that every event revolved around personal meaning. The river did not curve for him. The wind did not shift against him. The empty boat did not collide at him. These events simply occurred. And yet the ego had inserted itself instantly, transforming neutral movement into personal drama. He noticed another layer. Even now, as he reflected, the ego attempted to reposition itself. I understand this now, it suggested. I'm seeing clearly. He smiled softly at this thought, not with judgment, but with recognition. The ego was resilient. It adapted quickly, even to insight. Seeing this, he did not try to eliminate it. That too would have been ego. Instead, he allowed it to be present, observed but not obeyed. The Zen path, he realized, was not about destroying the ego. It was about no longer being ruled by it. The ego could arise without being given the steering oars. This distinction felt crucial. The river widened into a broad, sunlit stretch. Light danced across the water, fragmenting into countless moving reflections. He watched them without trying to fix them into shapes or meanings. Something softened again. The ego, deprived of urgency, relaxed. He saw now how ego fed on reaction. When he resisted experience, when he insisted on control, the ego grew louder. When he allowed experience as it was, the ego quieted naturally. Not gone, but no longer dominant. He reflected on how often spiritual language was misunderstood. People spoke of losing the ego as if it were a heroic act, a dramatic transformation. But what he experienced now felt far simpler and far more human. It was the difference between gripping and resting. The ego gripped. Awareness rested. He felt a deep compassion arise, not only for himself, but for others. How many conflicts, he wondered, were simply two egos colliding, each convinced of its centrality? How many arguments escalated because neither side paused long enough to see the emptiness beneath the story? This compassion was not sentimental. It was clear-eyed. It did not excuse harm, but it explained reactivity. The empty boat returned to his awareness, not as an image, but as a principle. When the ego was absent, the boat was empty. When the ego was present, the boat was full of assumption. Conflict, he now saw, required fullness, full of identity, full of expectation, full of me. The river flowed effortlessly because it was empty of self. It did not argue with obstacles. It moved around them, absorbed them, carried them along. He wondered briefly what it would mean to live more like that. Not passively, not without boundaries, but without constant self-reference. To respond rather than react. To act without the need to defend an image. The thought felt both challenging and strangely light. He did not promise himself change. Promises, he sensed, belonged to the ego's desire for improvement. Instead, he stayed with awareness, with seeing. The lesson of the empty boat had deepened. It was no longer just about anger. It was about identity, about the quiet assumption that life was happening to him, rather than through him, about the habit of standing at the center of experience, measuring everything by how it affected that center. As the river carried him forward, he felt gratitude, not for the insight itself, but for the simplicity of how it arrived. No sermon, no command, just a moment of contact followed by honest seeing. The ego had revealed itself, not as an enemy, but as a pattern, one that could now be noticed, softened, and gently set aside, moment by moment. The river continued, and for the first time, he felt less like someone traveling through it, and more like someone moving with it. The man no longer measured the river. Earlier that morning, without realizing it, he had been constantly evaluating his journey. How smooth the water felt, how quiet the surroundings were, how closely the experience matched his expectations of peace. Now, something fundamental had shifted. The habit of assessment softened, and in its place arose a simple attentiveness. He was still aware of the river, but he was no longer trying to manage it. The current moved beneath his boat with steady assurance. At times it quickened, at times it slowed, responding to bends in the riverbed unseen from the surface. Before, these changes might have unsettled him. Now, he noticed them without resistance. This, he sensed, was what it meant to let the river flow. Not indifference, not passivity, but cooperation without control. He felt the oars resting lightly in his hands. When adjustment was needed, he made it. When it wasn't, he allowed the boat to drift. There was no urgency in his movements, no inner tension pushing him to anticipate the next correction. For the first time, action arose naturally rather than defensively. He noticed how different this felt in his body. The shoulders that had once braced for disturbance now moved freely. His breathing was no longer shallow or guarded. Each inhale arrived without effort. Each exhale released without being forced. The river did not reward this change. It did not suddenly become smoother or more predictable. Branches still floated by. Subtle currents tugged at the hull. The environment had not changed. He had. This distinction felt important. Letting the river flow did not mean escaping uncertainty. It meant meeting uncertainty without resistance. The world remained as dynamic as ever. The difference was the absence of internal struggle. He remembered how earlier, a simple collision had ignited anger. Now, smaller disturbances passed without triggering reaction. The boat bumped gently against a floating leaf. He felt the contact, noticed it, and did nothing. The moment dissolved on its own. He smiled faintly, not out of pride, but out of recognition. The mind had learned something. He reflected on how often he had tried to impose flow on life, carefully planning, anticipating problems, rehearsing responses, all of it driven by a desire to avoid discomfort. And yet discomfort had still found him, arriving in forms he could not predict. The Zen masters teach that suffering arises not from change, but from resisting change. The man felt the truth of this teaching now, not as an abstract idea, but as lived experience. When he resisted the collision, suffering arose. When he allowed the river, suffering faded. The simplicity of it surprised him. He realized now that control had always been a negotiation with fear. Fear of chaos, fear of vulnerability, fear of being affected. Letting the river flow meant allowing himself to be affected without immediately defending against it. This required trust. Not trust in the river itself, but trust in his capacity to respond. Earlier, his ego had insisted on preemptive defense. React first, understand later. Now, awareness created a pause. And in that pause, choice appeared. He could respond or not. He could adjust or allow. He could act without reaction. This freedom felt subtle but profound. The river curved gently, revealing a wider horizon. The banks pulled farther apart, and the sky opened above him. Light shimmered on the water in shifting patterns, never settling, never repeating. He watched without trying to capture the scene in memory. He noticed another change. Time felt different, not slower or faster, but less urgent. Moments did not rush him forward. He was not trying to reach the next stretch of river. The journey no longer felt like a means to an end. It was simply unfolding. He reflected on how this attitude might extend beyond the river. In conversations, in work, in relationships. How many conflicts, he wondered, arose because he tried to control outcomes instead of engaging with processes, trying to manage how others responded, trying to ensure he was understood, trying to secure certainty in inherently uncertain spaces. Each attempt at control carried tension. Letting the river flow suggested a different approach, listening without preparing rebuttals, acting without attachment to results, allowing misunderstanding without immediate correction. Not because these things did not matter, but because forcing clarity often created more confusion. The river offered no guarantees. It did not promise calm passage ahead. Rapids might appear. Narrow channels might force difficult navigation. Letting the river flow did not mean abandoning skill or awareness. It meant using them without fear. He held the oars again, this time with ease. When the current shifted, he adjusted. When it stabilized, he rested. Each movement felt appropriate, unforced. He saw now that wisdom was dynamic. It responded to the moment rather than clinging to rules. Earlier, he had believed peace meant stillness. Now he understood peace as flexibility. Still water could hide tension. Flowing water released it. The empty boat returned to his thoughts once more, but now without emotional charge. It had completed its work. Its lesson had been absorbed into a broader understanding. Life would always include collisions. Not all could be avoided. Not all required reaction. Letting the river flow did not prevent contact. It prevented unnecessary conflict. He felt gratitude. Not the emotional gratitude directed at something specific, but a quiet appreciation for the unfolding of experience itself. For the collision that had revealed anger. For the anger that had revealed ego. For the ego that had revealed the possibility of release. Each stage had depended on the previous one. Nothing had been wasted. The river carried him toward a stretch where the current deepened, moving with quiet strength. He sensed that this journey would continue long after he left the water. The river, in one form or another, would follow him into daily life. Interruptions would come. Expectations would be challenged. Empty boats would appear again. But now, he knew something he had not known before. He did not need to fight the river to find peace. He needed to move with it. Letting the river flow was not a technique to be mastered. It was an attitude, a willingness to meet life as it arrived, without immediately filling it with resistance. The man leaned back slightly, eyes soft, awareness open. The boat moved forward, steady and unhurried. The river flowed, and for the first time, he flowed with it. The river had grown quiet again. After the storm of thoughts, the long days of resistance, and the slow unraveling of his anger, Liang found himself drifting in stillness. Not because the world had changed, but because something within him had softened. The oars rested gently across his knees, untouched. The water reflected the sky like a vast, unbroken mirror. He had spent many days observing the river since the incident with the empty boat. At first, he watched it with the curiosity of a student, hoping to extract lessons as one extracts pearls from an oyster. Later, he watched it with patience, letting insights arise naturally. Now, he watched it with no expectation at all. And it was in this absence of seeking that the deepest realization arrived. Liang began to understand that the empty boat was never merely an external event. It was a mirror, one that reflected not another's intention, but his own inner landscape. The collision on the river had not created his anger. It had revealed it. Zen teachings often speak in paradoxes. The problem is not the world. The problem is your resistance to the world. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. There is no enemy outside the mind. Liang had heard such phrases before, but only now did they cease to be ideas. They became lived truth, the illusion of external conflict. For most of his life, Liang had believed conflict was something that happened to him. A harsh word from a colleague, a betrayal by a friend, an insult from a stranger. Each incident seemed to arrive uninvited, like an arrow shot from the outside world. But now, Sitting on the river in silence, he saw the pattern clearly. Every conflict followed the same internal sequence. 1. An event occurred. 2. The mind assigned intention. 3. The ego took offense. 4. Anger arose. 5. Suffering followed. The empty boat had disrupted this sequence. When there was no one to blame, the chain collapsed. Anger could not take root without an imagined enemy. The mind searched desperately for someone to accuse, but found only emptiness. And in that emptiness, Liang saw the truth. Most conflicts are not caused by what happens. They're caused by the story we tell about what happens. A boat drifting into another boat is simply wood touching wood. It becomes an insult only when the mind supplies a villain. Meeting the inner boatman, Zen masters often ask their students unsettling questions. Who is angry? Where does this feeling arise? Can you find the one who is offended? Liang turned these questions inward. When anger arose, he no longer asked, "Why did this happen to me?" Instead, he asked, "Who is this happening to?" At first, the question felt abstract, but with continued contemplation, he began to notice something subtle. Anger did not belong to a solid self. It appeared like a weather pattern, arising, intensifying, fading, without a permanent owner. He realized that within him lived an inner boatman, a figure who believed he was steering life, controlling outcomes, and deserving smooth passage. When reality contradicted this belief, the inner boatman felt insulted. The problem was not the river. The problem was the illusion of control. When the inner boatman loosened his grip, the river no longer felt hostile. It simply flowed. Responsibility without blame. One of the most misunderstood aspects of Buddhist wisdom is responsibility. Many mistake it for blame, believing that acknowledging inner causes means excusing harm or injustice. But Zen teaches something far more nuanced. Liang understood now. Responsibility is not about condemning oneself. It is about reclaiming freedom. When we believe others control our emotional state, we become prisoners of circumstance. But when we see that our reactions arise from within, we regain agency, not to control the world, but to meet it wisely. This did not mean Liang denied wrongdoing when it existed. It did not mean he tolerated abuse or injustice. It meant that he no longer allowed anger to poison his clarity. The Buddha once taught, holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. Liang saw how often he had burned himself while waiting for others to feel the heat. The great inner turning, the deepest transformation occurred not through effort, but through surrender. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Liang felt anger arise again, this time from memory. An old grievance resurfaced, sharp and vivid. His chest tightened, his jaw clenched. Instead of pushing it away, he stayed. He watched the sensation without naming it, without justifying it, without feeding it. He let it be exactly as it was. And something extraordinary happened. The anger dissolved, not because it was fought, but because it was seen. In Zen, this is called kensho, seeing into one's true nature. Not a dramatic revelation, but a quiet recognition. Emotions have no permanent substance. They persist only when believed. Liang realized that every time anger arose, it was another empty boat, colliding not with his vessel, but with his expectations. The world as a river of empty boats. From that day forward, Liang moved through life differently. When criticized, he listened for truth rather than tone. When misunderstood, he noticed the urge to defend and let it pass. When inconvenienced, he smiled inwardly at the familiar stirring of the ego. He no longer asked, "Who did this to me?" He asked, "What is this teaching me about myself?" The world did not become kinder overnight. People still spoke harshly. Circumstances still shifted without warning. Boats still drifted unpredictably. But Liang was no longer wounded by collisions. He saw that most people, like boats on the river, moved unconsciously, pushed by currents of fear, desire, and conditioning. Expecting them to act with perfect awareness was like expecting the wind to obey commands. Understanding this, compassion arose naturally. The final insight. The Zen story of the empty boat ends without fanfare. No sermon, no moral spelled out. And that is its power. Liang understood why. Truth that must be explained is not yet ripe. Wisdom that can be argued is not yet embodied. The empty boat does not teach by speaking. It teaches by revealing what was already inside you. In the deepest sense, the empty boat is not about others at all. It is about the space within you where anger has nowhere to land. When that space is clear, conflicts lose their fuel. When the mind is empty of accusation, the heart becomes light. And so Liang continued down the river, not seeking calm, not resisting disturbance, but meeting each moment as it arrived. Empty boat, open river, unburdened heart. This was not the end of conflict. It was the end of unnecessary suffering. And that, the Zen masters say, is freedom. The sun had risen high, casting a golden ribbon along the river surface. The man, Liang, leaned back in his small boat, letting the warmth seep into his shoulders, into the tension he no longer needed to carry. The river flowed steadily, each ripple and current a quiet reminder that the world moved independently of his desires or judgments. Yet, for the first time, Liang felt at ease, not because the river had changed, but because he had. He recalled the first moments after the collision with the empty boat, the sharp spike of anger, the clenching of his fists, the rapid heartbeat. He remembered blaming the other, imagining malice, and rehearsing arguments in his mind. He could see now how much suffering had been self-inflicted, created by a mind that had misunderstood reality. And he realized this was the path to freedom, not the dramatic freedom of heroic deeds, nor the freedom of escaping responsibility, not the freedom of controlling outcomes or winning battles, but the quiet, unassuming freedom of seeing things as they are, of noticing the movement of thoughts and emotions without being swept away by them. The nature of anger, Liang reflected, is one of the most persistent teachers. It arises quickly, often without warning. It is sharp, vivid, and demanding. It promises clarity and justice, yet delivers only tension and resistance. For years, Liang had believed that anger was a response to injustice, that it was righteous, necessary, even noble. Now he saw that anger is not loyal to truth or fairness. It is loyal only to expectation. It surfaces whenever reality contradicts desire. And yet, anger itself is not inherently wrong. Like fire, it has uses, it warns, protects, and motivates. But its misuse comes from identification, believing that this moment must be different than it is. When he clung to anger, he suffered. When he observed it without clinging, he learned. He thought of the empty boat. It had been harmless, floating aimlessly, yet his mind had filled it with accusation, with intent, with threat. The collision was an illusion in the narrative his mind constructed. The lesson was clear. Most conflicts are projections, born from attachment to outcomes, shaped by ego and expectation. Turning inward, freedom, he realized, begins inside. The world cannot be controlled. Others cannot be forced to act according to one's wishes. But the inner landscape, where thoughts arise, where reactions are born, can be observed. It cannot be coerced, but it can be met with awareness. This is the subtle power of mindfulness. Liang noticed again the presence of his ego, that quiet voice that had once insisted on smooth passage, that had demanded recognition and respect, that had pushed him to fight, resist, or correct. He no longer sought to destroy it. That, too, was a battle, and battles create conflict. Instead, he observed it. He saw the ego's patterns as they arose. The small insistences, the judgments, the narratives of self-centered concern. Seeing them, he understood they had no ultimate authority. They were part of the river of his mind, flowing with or against the current, but not defining it. Compassion through understanding. As his insight deepened, Liang felt an expanding sense of compassion. Not the sentimental or pitying kind, but a clear, direct understanding. all beings navigate life with the same unconscious projections. Every moment of irritation, every slight, every conflict is rooted in a mind that perceives threat or loss. Others, like him, are often lost in their own empty boats, colliding with reality and then with each other. This recognition did not excuse harmful behavior, but it allowed space for patience. Anger was no longer a reflexive response. It was information, a signal pointing to the place where expectation met reality. When he met this signal with awareness rather than reaction, clarity followed. This clarity brought freedom. Liang considered how many times he had reacted in daily life to imagined offenses, a colleague's harsh tone, a friend's neglect, a stranger's impatience. In each case, the mind had manufactured a collision. The empty boats had been everywhere. And yet, each time, the pattern could be interrupted by awareness, by seeing the projection, by pausing, by recognizing the internal source of conflict. The practice of presence. Freedom is not a destination, it is a practice. Liang knew that the river would bring new collisions, new disturbances, new empty boats. Rapids would appear. Unexpected branches would drift into his path. There would be moments when the mind leapt into reaction before awareness could respond. This was inevitable. The practice was not perfection, but presence. Noticing, pausing, allowing, observing. He imagined life as a river of infinite bends and currents. Some waters were smooth, some violent, some unpredictable. The more he clung to control, the more turbulence he felt. The more he flowed with what was, the lighter he became. He could move with skill and care, adjusting when necessary, but without the compulsive insistence of the ego. Each response became deliberate, chosen, not driven by fear or habit. In this practice, he discovered the simplicity of Zen. The great teachings do not promise to change the river. They teach how to navigate it, to act with compassion, to respond with awareness, to let go of imagined offense, to see the empty boats as they are, and recognize the emptiness within himself. Freedom as daily life. Liang looked at the shimmering water, each ripple reflecting sunlight in fractured brilliance. The river moved in endless motion, yet he no longer felt a need to resist it. He realized that this freedom was not separate from life. It was life itself. The peace he sought was not somewhere beyond the current. It was in seeing the current as it is. The oars, once gripped tightly, now rested lightly in his hands. He guided the boat gently, but allowed the river's flow to do the heavy lifting. There was no hurry. There was no struggle. There is only the unfolding of each moment and the deepening awareness that he was not defined by temporary disturbances. He remembered the anger he had felt at the empty boat. It had been genuine, real, and potent. And yet, when observed, it transformed. It became understanding. It became insight. It became freedom. Without a target, the fire of anger had nowhere to land and, paradoxically, could no longer burn him. The same could be true of any disturbance, external or internal, if met with awareness rather than resistance. A vision of peace. As the day waned and the river broadened into a calm expanse, Liang felt a quiet joy. Not the excitement of worldly pleasure, not the fleeting satisfaction of accomplishments, but a steady, deep contentment arising from the alignment of mind and reality. He had discovered that the source of peace was within, independent of circumstance, independent of other people, independent of outcomes. He reflected on the wisdom of the Buddha and the Zen masters. So often, humans suffer not because of what happens, but because they resist what is. They fight the river instead of moving with it. They grasp at boats that do not exist, at offenses that are projections, at expectations that reality cannot fulfill. And yet, freedom is possible when one stops fighting, when one sees clearly, when one allows life to flow through awareness. Liang knew now that the empty boat was a teacher unlike any other. It had no face, no voice, no intent. Yet it had revealed the truth of his mind, the nature of conflict, and the path to liberation. Anger, he realized, is a signpost pointing inward. Understanding, patience, and compassion are the response. Freedom is the gift. He lifted the oars and dipped them lightly into the water. The boat glided forward, moving with the current, not against it. The river shimmered with the reflections of clouds and sun. Each movement, each ripple, each gentle collision with floating leaves reminded him that life is in constant motion, but the mind need not be tossed about with it. The freedom he had discovered was quiet, deep, and expansive. It was not about avoiding the world. It was about meeting the world without unnecessary resistance, seeing clearly, and letting the river carry him where it would. The empty boat had revealed the inner source of conflict, and in seeing it, he had glimpsed the possibility of lasting peace. For the first time, Liang felt wholly present, not as someone fighting the river, not as someone defending against disturbances, but as a participant in the flow of life, aware, compassionate, and free. The river flowed endlessly, and so did he. Freedom was not a distant destination. It was here, now, in the acceptance of what is, in the release of imagined targets, and in the quiet knowing that most conflicts are inside you. And with that, the man and the river became one. The river had grown wide now, stretching endlessly toward the horizon. Liang's small boat floated lightly, guided more by the current than by his own hands. The sun's rays glimmered on the water, scattering light like shards of crystal across the gentle ripples. The wind whispered through the reeds along the riverbank, carrying the faint scent of earth and wildflowers. It was a morning like any other, and yet, for Liang, nothing could have been more profound. He leaned back, letting the boat drift. For the first time in many lifetimes, or so it felt, he allowed himself to simply be, not trying to control the world, not analyzing his thoughts, not anticipating the next collision or disturbance. The mind, once a constant source of tension, had settled into quiet observation. He could feel the subtle rhythms of his body, the rise and fall of his chest, the beating of his heart, the gentle sway of the boat. Every breath, every movement, every sound, the rustle of leaves, the chirping of birds, the soft lapping of water, was a lesson in impermanence, in presence, in awareness. Seeing clearly, Liang reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The empty boat, the sudden surge of anger, the self-reflection that followed, the slow, quiet unfolding of insight along the river. All these experiences had taught him a profound truth, that most conflicts exist not outside of us, but within. He saw how the mind constructs stories, filling empty spaces with imagined intentions, perceived slights, and assumptions of harm. The collision with the boat was never personal. It had no purpose, no malice, no design to upset him. It was simply an event, like a leaf falling onto the water. Yet the ego immediately read it as an attack, as an injustice, as a threat to the self. The story that followed was what gave rise to anger, not the boat itself. He understood now that clarity arises when one observes the mind without judgment. When you see thoughts and emotions for what they are, impermanent, arising and passing, like waves on the surface of the river, you no longer mistake them for truth. You no longer believe the world is attacking you, nor that you must defend yourself at every turn. This seeing, this direct awareness, was the beginning of freedom. The nature of true freedom. True freedom, Liang realized, is not an escape from difficulty. It is not the absence of challenges, the absence of conflict, or the absence of suffering. Freedom is the ability to meet life as it is, moment by moment, without grasping, without resistance, without clinging. It is the mind's release from the tyranny of expectation, the heart's release from the need to control or defend, the spirit's release from the endless cycle of offense and retaliation. He thought of all the moments he had wasted, carrying the weight of imagined wrongs. How often had he rehearsed responses to slights that never existed? How often had he burned himself with the fire of anger while waiting for someone else to feel pain or regret? All of it arose from the mind's refusal to see clearly. All of it dissipated when he simply allowed things to be, when he simply observed, when he simply let go. Freedom, he realized, is less about mastering the world and more about mastering the mind. It is about turning inward and meeting the source of all conflict with clarity and compassion. When he could do this, no empty boat could disturb him. No imagined slight could consume him. No disturbance could claim his peace. Compassion and connection. As he drifted, Liang's awareness expanded beyond himself. He saw that all beings are like boats on a river, floating, moving, sometimes colliding, often unaware of their own projections and attachments. People act from fear, desire, habit, and conditioning, just as he had once acted from attachment and expectation. Understanding this, he felt a quiet compassion for others, not pity, not judgment, but recognition. Compassion, he realized, does not require someone to be perfect. It does not require someone to act according to your wishes or values. It is the simple recognition that all beings, like the river, are subject to impermanence. Everyone carries invisible burdens, navigates invisible currents, and collides with unseen obstacles. To respond with awareness rather than anger, with patience rather than resistance, is to honor that shared humanity. He recalled the empty boat again. It had taught him not only about anger, but about the fundamental interconnectedness of experience. The boat was not separate from him, nor he from the river. Likewise, others are not separate from him. Their actions are reflections of the universal currents of mind and heart. Every collision, every disturbance is an opportunity to practice awareness, to cultivate compassion, to let go of the ego's claim to centrality. The flow of impermanence. Liang's thoughts drifted to impermanence, the truth that everything arises and passes, that nothing lasts, that all conditions are transient. The river itself was a constant teacher of impermanence. Water moves, shifts, and changes, never holding the same form twice. The sunlight on its surface sparkled differently with each moment, never repeating, never static. His anger, his thoughts, his feelings, his judgments, like the water, were temporary. Like the empty boat, they existed only until seen, only until released, only until the mind no longer clung. This realization did not mean passivity or indifference. Rather, it inspired a profound engagement with life. Knowing that every moment is fleeting, every disturbance temporary, Liang felt a deeper appreciation for the present. He could act with clarity and purpose without attachment to outcomes. He could respond with skill without reactivity. He could love, teach, work, and live fully, knowing that each moment is precious and impermanent. Returning to the selfless boat, Liang's attention returned to the inner landscape. He saw that the empty boat within, the space free of ego, free of attachment, free of story, was not a destination, but a living reality. It was present whenever the mind stopped clinging, whenever awareness was allowed to meet experience directly. He realized that this inner emptiness was not a void of life or feeling, but a space of freedom and clarity. It was the source from which true action arises. From this place, one could act without aggression, speak without malice, love without expectation, and live without unnecessary suffering. The boat, empty yet full of possibility, had always been inside him. The river had merely reflected it. Integration into life. As the river widened into the estuary, flowing toward unknown horizons, Liang thought about returning to the world of daily life. The lessons of the river, the emptiness of the boat, the transient nature of anger, the freedom beyond ego, the compassion born from awareness, were not meant to remain on the water. They were meant to be lived, practiced, and expressed in every interaction, every decision, every breath. He understood that life would continue to present collisions, misunderstandings, disappointments, frustrations. But he would meet them differently. He would notice the rise of anger, observe the projections of the mind, pause before reacting and choose a response rooted in awareness and compassion. In this way, he would carry the river within him, letting the flow of life move through his heart rather than against it. Liang's gaze extended to the horizon. The river merged seamlessly with the sky, and he felt a sense of vastness, of limitless potential. The journey on the river had ended, but the journey within had only begun. The empty boat was no longer a single event or lesson. It was a living guide, a constant reminder of the freedom that comes from seeing clearly, from letting go, from flowing with life rather than resisting it. The final insight, the ultimate teaching, revealed itself quietly, without fanfare. Conflicts exist not because the world is hostile, but because the mind interprets experience through ego and attachment. Anger arises not from events, but from identification with perceived offenses. Freedom is found not by changing the river, but by changing one's relationship to it. Awareness dissolves suffering. Compassion arises naturally when the self is no longer the center of every collision. And the empty boat, once a source of anger and disturbance, becomes a symbol of clarity, insight, and liberation. Liang smiled, not outwardly, but inwardly, feeling a profound peace that no longer depended on conditions. He dipped the oars lightly, guiding the boat not with force but with harmony. The river continued its endless journey. The empty boat remained, always visible, always teaching, always reminding him of the profound truth. Freedom is inside, and the world outside is merely the mirror of the mind. And as the river carried him forward, Liang realized that he had come home, not to a place, not to a destination, but to himself, aware, present, and free. The journey of the river had ended. The journey of awareness had begun. And in that beginning, Liang knew he was truly, finally, at peace. The river had grown even quieter now, almost imperceptibly so, as if it too had learned the lessons of stillness. Liang's boat drifted gently, moving in harmony with the current. The sun hung low in the sky, bathing the water in a golden light that made every ripple sparkle. It was in this quiet hour that Liang began to confront a lesson he had long avoided: compassion for himself. For years, he had measured his worth by his ability to control his mind, to avoid anger, to respond perfectly in every situation. Every emotion was a test, every reaction a failure or success. If he lost his temper, he judged himself. If he hesitated, he criticized himself. And even as he had learned to observe empty boats and the rise of anger in others, he realized that his most persistent collisions had been with himself. He reflected on the moments he had been harsh with his own heart. How often had he scolded himself for feeling sadness, for feeling fear, for allowing impatience to surface? These judgments were like chains, binding him to suffering long after the external disturbance had passed. Every time the mind branded an emotion as wrong, it created tension and resistance. The boat within him rocked, not because of the river, but because he refused to allow himself to simply feel. The mirror of judgment. Liang thought of the empty boat again, not the literal one, but the inner one that carried his own projections, fears, and expectations. How many times had he collided with that boat and reacted with anger, only to discover that the source of suffering was not outside but inside? Now he saw that the harshest collisions were with himself. When he felt disappointment or frustration, he often became his own enemy. He pushed, pulled, and resisted, treating natural human emotions as faults rather than signs of life's dynamism. The mind had been quick to judge, quick to assign blame, quick to declare, "You should not feel this." But as he observed these internal conflicts with quiet awareness, he realized how unnecessary they were. No emotion, no matter how unwelcome, required punishment. Every feeling was a message, a wave in the river of consciousness, meant to be seen and understood rather than condemned. Learning to sit with emotions. Liang began a new practice. When sadness arose, he would pause and allow it to be, without pushing it away or trying to fix it. When fear or anger surfaced, he no longer branded it as a weakness, nor tried to suppress it. Instead, he would observe it gently, like watching clouds float across the sky, understanding that every emotion is impermanent, arising and passing like ripples on the river. This practice was not easy. Old habits die slowly. Sometimes he caught himself recoiling, judging, or attempting to correct an emotion. And yet, with each moment of awareness, the habit loosened. The river of his mind became smoother, less turbulent, not because emotions disappeared, but because his relationship to them changed. He was learning to respond with compassion rather than judgment, to treat himself as he would treat a friend who had been hurt. The paradox of self-compassion. Liang reflected on the paradox of self-compassion. It is not indulgence, and it is not weakness. It does not mean ignoring mistakes or refusing to learn. Rather, it is the understanding that suffering arises naturally in human life, that emotions are neither good nor bad, and that judging oneself only prolongs the pain. By allowing himself to be human, he created the space to grow. By embracing his own heart, he discovered the freedom to act wisely and with clarity. Compassion for the self is a mirror of compassion for others. He had learned to respond to empty boats, misunderstandings, and irritations with patience and insight. Now, he saw that the same care must be applied inwardly. If he could meet himself with gentleness, he could navigate life without the added burden of internal conflict. Forgiveness of the inner boat. Liang remembered the countless times he had been harsh with himself for reacting to the world. He had punished his own thoughts, chastised his own feelings, and carried shame for emotions that were entirely natural. In that moment, he made a quiet decision. He would forgive himself, not through words alone, but through awareness and practice. Each memory of self-criticism became an opportunity for compassion. Each moment of irritation at his own impatience became a chance to let go. The empty boat within him, once a source of anger, fear, and self-recrimination, was now a vessel for understanding, patience, and kindness. He no longer needed to collide with himself. Instead, he could sit with his emotions, acknowledge them, and release them. A gentle mind in action, Liang noticed a subtle shift in his daily life. Where once he had been quick to react with inner tension, he now approached situations with a softer mind. When challenges arose, he allowed space for his feelings instead of suppressing or judging them. He spoke to himself quietly, encouraging reflection rather than condemnation. Mistakes became lessons, not marks of failure. Even in moments of anger or frustration, he could pause and recognize the sensation without letting it define him. The river of awareness within him was deepening. Emotions flowed like water, moving naturally, without unnecessary resistance. He realized that the peace he sought outwardly had always depended on this inward gentleness. The interconnected heart. Compassion for oneself is inseparable from compassion for others. Liang saw that the anger he once carried toward empty boats, toward people, and toward circumstances had mirrored the lack of kindness he held for himself. Now, by treating himself with patience, he found that his capacity to treat others with patience increased. By forgiving his own mistakes, he could forgive those of others more easily. By accepting his own vulnerabilities, he could accept the vulnerabilities of everyone he encountered. It was a revelation of interconnectedness. The inner boat and the outer world were reflections of each other. The peace he cultivated within became a ripple, extending outward to every collision, every relationship, every moment of life. Embracing humanity, Liang realized the simplicity and profundity of self-compassion. To treat oneself as human, to acknowledge suffering, to allow imperfection, to release the ego's relentless judgment. And in doing so, he discovered the quiet dignity of being alive, the profound beauty in simply existing, feeling, and experiencing. He understood now that self-compassion is a lifelong practice. It is not a goal to achieve, but a river to navigate. Emotions will rise, challenges will come, empty boats will appear endlessly. The difference is in the gentleness with which he meets himself at every moment. The lesson of the river. The river reflected the sky, wide and open, flowing without effort, without struggle. Liang smiled inwardly, recognizing the parallel to his own mind. By treating himself with kindness, by embracing the ebb and flow of feelings without judgment, he had learned to navigate life's waters with grace. Anger, fear, sadness, joy, each became part of the journey, not obstacles to it. And as the boat drifted onward, Liang felt a deep gratitude, not for calm waters, not for perfect understanding, but for the capacity to meet himself with compassion. He realized that this, more than any external circumstance, was the truest freedom, to be fully present, fully human, fully aware, and fully gentle with his own heart. The empty boat still appeared from time to time, as all challenges do, but now it no longer frightened him. It was a teacher, a mirror, a guide, revealing not a world to fight against, but a self to embrace. And in this embrace, he found peace, clarity, and a love that flowed outward from the heart like the river itself. Liang leaned back, allowing the boat to glide forward. The water carried him. The wind brushed against his face, and for the first time, he felt completely at home. Not in the world, not in the river, but within himself. Compassion for the self had unlocked a door that no empty boat, no collision, and no external disturbance could ever close. It was a sanctuary within, always available, always flowing, always gentle. And in that sanctuary, Liang smiled, letting his heart be soft, open, and free. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of dew-soaked earth and river reeds. Liang's boat drifted quietly along the broad expanse of water. He had long since learned to move with the river rather than against it, to observe the currents without clinging, and to meet his own emotions with compassion. And yet, a subtle tension lingered, not in the water, not in the world, but in the mind's old habit of assigning meaning and judgment to every ripple, every wave, every passing boat. Today, Liang noticed something profound. The empty boats were everywhere, not just on the river, but in every corner of his life. Every moment of irritation, every conflict with another, every surge of anger or fear could be traced back to the same pattern. He, or anyone, assigned intention where none existed, created a narrative of attack or offense, and then collided with a self that believed it was under threat. Recognizing patterns, as he drifted, Liang reflected on the countless times he had misunderstood situations. A colleague had spoken harshly, and he had interpreted it as criticism. A friend had been late, and he had taken it as disrespect. A stranger had cut in line, and he had imagined malice. Each of these moments was an empty boat, harmless in itself, yet charged with meaning by the mind. And each collision had caused unnecessary tension, unnecessary anger, unnecessary suffering. He had blamed others, fought against circumstances, and punished himself, all for boats that carried no ill intent. He realized now that what had truly been harmed was not his body, not his life, but the stories he created inside his own mind. The mind, in assigning intention and significance, had become both the source and the target of conflict. The anger, the disappointment, the frustration, they were manifestations of his own projections, like waves crashing against the hull of his inner boat. The mirror of conflict. Liang noticed that every external conflict mirrored an internal one. When he became upset at another person, it was often a reflection of his own expectations, judgments, or unacknowledged emotions. The empty boats of the river were a metaphor for the empty boats of life, situations without inherent meaning, made heavy only by the mind's interpretations. This awareness brought both clarity and humility. He had spent decades expecting life to conform to his desires, expecting others to act in ways that would protect his ego, expecting himself to be free of imperfection. And each time reality diverged from expectation, he had suffered. Now, he saw that suffering was not imposed by the world. It was self-inflicted, the inevitable consequence of seeing intention where there was none. The habit of projection. Liang began to notice how habitual this pattern had been. The mind loves narrative. It seeks meaning, cause, and effect, even where there is none. A random glance, an accidental collision, a misheard word. These become stories of insult, attack, and judgment. And then the mind, believing in its own story, reacts as if the threat were real. This projection was like painting the empty boat with the colors of fear, pride, and desire. Once painted, the boat seemed threatening, intentional, and personal. But in truth, it remained empty, harmless, and drifting. The moment of choice. Recognizing empty boats everywhere also revealed a profound freedom. At every moment, he could choose whether to collide with them or to notice their emptiness. The instinct to defend, to react, to judge, these were natural, but they were no longer necessary. By observing, pausing, and understanding, he could respond with awareness rather than react with habit. Liang practiced this awareness with every passing ripple. He imagined each irritation, each conflict, as an empty boat on the river of life. And in that imagination, he discovered the softening of the mind and heart. The tightness of resistance loosened. The heat of anger cooled. The insistence on being right, being safe, being understood began to dissolve. Seeing others' empty boats, this insight extended beyond himself. Liang began to perceive that others, too, navigated the world on their own empty boats, often unaware of the projections and interpretations they were carrying. A colleague's harsh tone was likely a reflection of stress, not malice. A stranger's rudeness may have stemmed from fear or distraction, not intentional harm. Each external collision was an opportunity to practice empathy, to respond with patience, and to recognize the shared human condition of projection and misunderstanding. He realized that when we see empty boats in ourselves and in others, judgment loses its grip. We no longer insist that reality conform to our desires or that others act according to our expectations. We meet life as it is with awareness, compassion, and acceptance. The liberation of perspective. The beauty of this understanding was liberating. Liang no longer felt the need to control the river or the boats on it. He no longer demanded that people behave according to his standards, nor that circumstances conform to his comfort. The recognition of empty boats everywhere allowed him to step back from conflict, to release attachment to being offended, and to navigate life with clarity and freedom. He understood now that freedom does not come from changing others, correcting the world, or erasing every perceived slight. Freedom comes from seeing clearly, from noticing the empty boats before colliding with them, and from understanding the inner source of conflict. Practicing mindful awareness, Liang began to integrate this insight into daily life. He noticed the surge of impatience at a slow cashier, the irritation at a friend's forgetfulness, the frustration with traffic. Each situation became a moment to observe. Is this boat truly full of intention? Or is it empty, made heavy only by my mind? By questioning the stories he created, he found peace. By allowing space between stimulus and reaction, he discovered choice. By recognizing the emptiness, he freed himself from unnecessary suffering. And in this freedom, compassion naturally arose for himself and for others alike. A river of infinite empty boats. As the sun climbed higher, Liang's boat drifted into a broad expanse of the river where countless other boats floated, some large, some small, some distant, some close. He saw the metaphor in vivid clarity. Life is a river of empty boats, each drifting according to currents beyond anyone's control. Collisions are inevitable, but suffering is optional. Awareness and understanding transform each potential conflict into a moment of practice, a chance to cultivate patience, compassion, and clarity. Liang's heart swelled with gratitude. The empty boats were no longer sources of fear or anger. They were teachers, mirrors, and reminders of the mind's habitual projections. And with each recognition, his inner boat became steadier, lighter, freer. He understood at last the essence of the lesson. Every irritation, every conflict, every surge of anger is a reflection of the mind's tendency to assign meaning where there is none. The empty boat is everywhere, not just on the river, but in every interaction, every challenge, every moment of life. And in seeing them clearly, he discovered liberation. Liang leaned back and let the river carry him. The sun glimmered on the water, and the gentle wind brushed against his face. Empty boats floated past, harmless, drifting with the current. And for the first time, Liang felt completely free. Free not from life, but free within life, guided by awareness, compassion, and the quiet wisdom of seeing things as they truly are. The river was calm, yet it carried the echoes of countless journeys. Liang's boat moved steadily with the current, gliding over waters that reflected the soft light of a late afternoon sun. He had long since learned to see empty boats everywhere, to recognize that most conflict arise from projections and interpretations of the mind. But now, a deeper lesson emerged. A lesson not about present disturbances, but about the lingering weight of the past. For decades, Liang had carried memories of anger, resentment, and regret like heavy stones in the hold of his inner boat. Old arguments with friends and family, perceived injustices, moments when he had failed or been humiliated, all of them drifted through his consciousness, dragging chains of suffering wherever he went. Even as he practiced awareness in the present, these past burdens tugged at the mind, triggering subtle collisions that disrupted his peace. The weight of yesterday. Liang reflected on the nature of memory. Memories are not just recollections. They are active forces shaping emotions, thoughts, and reactions in the present. A forgotten insult could ignite irritation years later. A moment of embarrassment could trigger shame in an unrelated situation. Each memory, unexamined and unrelieved, became a silent, empty boat, floating through life and colliding with the mind again and again. He realized that holding on to the past is like grasping driftwood in a river. The current is strong, and every grasp creates tension and imbalance. The river will carry the wood whether or not you hold it, and holding it only prevents your own boat from moving freely. Likewise, holding onto old grievances anchors the mind in suffering. It prevents the present moment from being fully experienced, and it transforms fleeting disturbances into chronic pain. Recognizing attachment, Liang closed his eyes and observed the currents within. He saw that the mind clings not only to pleasant memories, but also to unpleasant ones. It clings to wrongs done, to injustices, to slights real or imagined, because attachment disguises itself as identity. I am this hurt, the mind insists. I am this anger. I am this resentment. But Liang knew that these identifications were not true. The self is not the memory, not the grievance, not the pain. They are experiences, passing waves in the river of consciousness. By clinging, the mind sustains suffering. By releasing, it discovers freedom, the practice of release. He began to practice the art of letting go. Each memory that surfaced became a boat, drifting toward him on the river of thought. Instead of seizing it, judging it, or reliving it, he simply observed. This is a memory, he told himself. It is not me. It is not my enemy. It is an event in time, now past. This practice was neither easy nor immediate. Some memories were sharp, returning with vivid emotion. Others were subtler, lingering in the shadows of thought. And yet, with each act of recognition without clinging, the burden lightened. He learned to meet old grievances with the same gentleness he had learned to offer himself and others. Awareness, acceptance, and compassion. Liang visualized each memory as a small boat on the river, floating past. Some boats carried storms, anger, betrayal, regret. but they were empty of inherent malice. They existed only because he had given them meaning. As he watched, they drifted farther downstream, their weight diminishing as awareness embraced them without resistance. Forgiving without forgetting. Letting go of the past did not mean denying experiences or pretending they never happened. It did not mean excusing harm or abandoning lessons learned. Rather, it was about disentangling the self from the memory, releasing the emotional charge that kept it alive in the present. Liang understood the power of forgiveness, not as an obligation to others, but as a gift to oneself. Forgiveness is not forgetting, nor is it condoning. It is the conscious decision to release the hold that past events have over the heart. When he forgave, he was not condoning harm. He was reclaiming peace. He remembered moments when he had held grudges, replaying arguments in his mind, and sustaining anger long after the event. Each time he had resisted release, the inner boat rocked violently, the mind churned with turbulence, and the heart carried unnecessary weight. By forgiving, by letting go, by seeing the empty boats for what they were, he could navigate the river with lighter steps, freer movements, and a calmer heart. The river as teacher. The river mirrored the process perfectly. Just as debris floats downstream, so too could memories be released without resistance. The current neither judged nor demanded. It carried each object as it was, without attachment. Liang realized that life operates the same way. Events pass, emotions arise and fade, and the present moment continues to flow. When he stopped holding on, the river and the mind moved in harmony. He began to see that many collisions in life are compounded by past grievances. A small irritation today triggers a memory from years ago, and suddenly anger multiplies. By letting go of the past, these chains could be broken. Awareness of the present, free from the weight of old grievances, allowed each encounter to be seen as it truly was, a fresh moment, unburdened by yesterday's storms. Compassion for past self. Liang also practiced compassion for his own past self, the part of him that had felt hurt, angry, ashamed, or afraid. That younger self had acted from ignorance, from incomplete understanding, and from human limitations. Instead of punishing or criticizing that self, he began to embrace it with the same gentleness he now extended to the present self. He imagined placing the younger Liang in a small, empty boat, letting it float freely on the river, free from judgment and blame. The act was simple, yet transformative. Every time he forgave his past self, he lightened the boat he carried in the present. He realized that holding resentment toward one's own history is one of the heaviest burdens of all. By embracing it with awareness and compassion, he found both peace and strength, seeing collisions as opportunities. As Liang reflected, he understood that empty boats, both past and present, were not just sources of suffering, but also teachers. Every collision carried a lesson, a chance to practice awareness, compassion, and letting go. When he encountered disturbances in the present, he could see how much of the tension arose from clinging to old hurts. Recognizing this allowed him to respond differently, to act from clarity instead of reaction, to navigate life's waters with skill rather than struggle. Each encounter became a mirror, reflecting not only the world outside, but also the unresolved currents within. And each act of release became a ripple, flowing outward, touching every relationship, every thought, every experience with a softening, calming presence. A new freedom. By letting go of the past, Liang discovered a new dimension of freedom. No longer burdened by memory or resentment, the river of life became open, expansive, and fluid. He could meet each moment freshly, without fear, without judgment, without the shadow of old grievances clouding his perception. The sun dipped lower, painting the river in shades of amber and rose. Liang's boat glided gently over the shimmering water. The empty boats, past conflicts, old resentments, and lingering anger, floated downstream, unclaimed, unresisted, unburdened. He could watch them without attachment, allowing them to move on as the river moved on. And in that letting go, Liang realized the profound truth. Peace does not come from changing the past, nor from holding others accountable for its impact. Peace comes from releasing, from awareness, from compassionate acceptance. It comes from allowing the river of life to flow, carrying the debris of memory and grievance without clinging. Liang leaned back, eyes closed, heart open, and allowed the river to carry him. The journey of release, like the river itself, had no end, only unfolding moments. Each moment offered freedom, clarity, and the gentle, sustaining wisdom of letting go. The past, once a heavy anchor, had become a teacher. The present, once fraught with tension, had become a space of clarity. And the river of life, ever flowing, carried Liang toward peace, toward compassion, and toward liberation from all unnecessary conflicts. The river stretched endlessly ahead, its surface shimmering with the soft glow of the afternoon sun. Liang's small boat floated effortlessly, moving with the gentle current. The waters were calm, yet beneath the surface flowed countless unseen eddies, carrying the detritus of countless days, years, and even lifetimes. Liang had learned to recognize empty boats in the present, those events and moments that appeared threatening only because of the projections of the mind. But now he faced a deeper current, the past itself. For many years, Liang had carried the weight of old grievances and unhealed memories as if they were stones chained to his chest. Past conflicts, moments of humiliation, mistakes, and perceived betrayals had lingered, dormant yet potent, quietly shaping his reactions and coloring his perceptions. Even after mastering awareness in the present moment, he realized that these buried fragments of the past often surfaced unexpectedly, stirring anger, resentment, or fear. The weight of memory. Liang reflected on the nature of memory and its hold over the mind. Memories are not passive recollections. They're active participants in the drama of consciousness. A forgotten insult could surface decades later, triggering irritation or pain. A past humiliation could subtly undermine confidence and generate fear in unrelated circumstances. Each unresolved experience acted like an empty boat drifting invisibly toward the present, colliding with the mind and causing ripples of suffering. He understood that holding onto these memories is akin to gripping driftwood in a fast-moving river. The river will carry the wood whether you cling to it or not. Holding it only creates tension and imbalance, draining energy and obstructing the natural flow of life. Similarly, clinging to past grievances anchors the mind in unnecessary suffering, preventing full engagement with the present. Observing without judgment, Liang closed his eyes, feeling the gentle sway of the boat beneath him. He observed the currents of memory within his mind, noticing how each recollection carried emotional weight. Instead of resisting or condemning these memories, he simply observed them, labeling them gently as memories without judgment. He practiced saying to himself, "This is a memory. It is not me. It is not my enemy. It is simply an event that occurred in time, now past." This practice was neither instant nor effortless. Some memories surfaced with sharp intensity, vivid in both sight and emotion. Others were subtle, lurking in the background, influencing thoughts without conscious recognition. Yet each act of mindful observation, each moment of awareness without clinging, released a fragment of the burden he had carried for so long. The illusion of self in the past. Liang realized that much of the suffering tied to past grievances came from identification. The mind often declares, "I am this hurt, I am this anger, I am this resentment." In doing so, it treats the memory as if it were a permanent part of the self. Yet Liang understood that the self is not the memory. It is not the injury, the shame, or the humiliation. These are experiences, waves on the river of consciousness, arising and passing. By disentangling the self from the memory, one can release the chains that hold the heart captive. This insight brought a deep sense of relief. Past events, once magnified into threats and injustices, could now be observed as mere phenomena. The mind, once captive to its own stories, began to open, creating space for freedom, clarity, and peace. Forgiveness as liberation. Liang also recognized that true release requires forgiveness, though not in the sense of excusing harm or forgetting lessons learned. Forgiveness is a gift to oneself, a conscious act of reclaiming peace. To forgive is to release the hold that past events have over the heart, to let go of anger, resentment, and regret that do not serve the present moment. He recalled moments when he had held grudges against friends, family, or colleagues, rehearsing arguments and replaying injustices in his mind. Each act of holding on had caused suffering not to the person who caused the grievance, but to himself. By forgiving, he reclaimed his own freedom. Forgiveness became a practice of inner liberation, a way to let the river flow without obstruction. Compassion for past self. Liang extended this compassion inward. He thought of his younger self, the one who had been hurt, humiliated, or misjudged. That self had acted from ignorance, fear, and incomplete understanding. Instead of judging or punishing that version of himself, Liang now met it with kindness. He imagined placing that younger self into a small, empty boat, allowing it to float gently downstream, free from blame, guilt, or shame. This simple practice of self-compassion was transformative. Every time he forgave and embraced his past self, the weight in his chest lifted. He realized that resentment toward one's own history is one of the heaviest burdens of all. By cultivating gentleness and acceptance, he discovered the strength to navigate life's present challenges with clarity and equanimity. Understanding collisions as opportunities. As Liang observed the river, he understood that empty boats, both past and present, were not merely sources of suffering, they were teachers. Each collision, each surge of memory or emotion, was an opportunity to practice mindfulness, patience, and compassion. The past, once viewed as a source of pain, became a mirror reflecting patterns of attachment, projection, and judgment. By meeting these internal collisions with awareness, Liang could respond to life more skillfully. When a current irritation or conflict arose, he could trace it back to its source, whether a present event or an unresolved memory. This practice allowed him to release reactive tendencies, to act with wisdom rather than habit, and to cultivate inner peace. Integrating the lesson. Liang began to integrate the practice of letting go into daily life. Whenever old grievances arose, he would pause, observe, and release. When feelings of resentment or anger surfaced, he would recognize them as echoes of the past rather than threats in the present. Each moment became a practice of mindful observation, a chance to disentangle himself from the chains of memory and reclaim his freedom. He realized that letting go does not mean erasing the past or pretending harm never occurred. It means acknowledging events as they were, learning from them, and then releasing the emotional charge they carry. In doing so, one allows the heart to remain light, the mind to remain clear, and the spirit to flow with life's currents. The river as a metaphor. The river mirrored this process beautifully. It carried everything, driftwood, leaves, stones, without judgment or attachment. Liang understood that life operates in the same way. Events and experiences pass, emotions arise and fade, and the present moment continues to flow. By releasing the past, he allowed himself to move freely, harmoniously, and without resistance. The empty boats of the past, once dangerous and heavy, could now drift downstream harmlessly. Their presence no longer dictated his peace. The mind, no longer anchored by old grievances, became a vessel of clarity, freedom, and gentle awareness. A sense of renewal. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long reflections across the water, Liang felt a profound sense of renewal. The past, once a source of friction and suffering, had become a teacher. Each grievance released was a wave returning to the river. Each memory observed without attachment became a ripple of understanding. Liang understood at last the ultimate truth. Peace does not come from changing the past, nor from holding others accountable for it. Peace comes from awareness, compassion, and the conscious act of letting go. By releasing old burdens, one frees the heart to engage fully with the present, unencumbered by the weight of yesterday. His boat glided gently over the river's surface, now lighter than ever, as if the currents themselves acknowledged the transformation within him. He closed his eyes, feeling the gentle sway of the boat, and allowed the river to carry him forward. The journey of letting go was ongoing, but it was also liberating, infinite, and deeply satisfying. In releasing the past, Liang discovered the clarity of the present. In forgiving and embracing memory, he discovered the freedom of the heart. And in moving with the river, he realized that the art of letting go is the art of living fully. Liang opened his eyes, feeling the sunlight warm his face, the wind brush against his skin, and the waters carry him onward. The river had taught him once again, let the past flow. Do not grasp, do not resist. Peace is always available to those willing to release and allow life to be as it is. The river stretched endlessly before Liang, bathed in the soft, golden light of early morning. A thin mist hovered above the water, curling and drifting in the gentle breeze. His boat moved silently, carried effortlessly by the current, yet this was not simply a physical drift. Liang felt deeply and fully that his entire being had entered a state of flow. Every lesson, every insight from the journey thus far, the empty boats, the awareness of anger, the compassion for self, the release of the past, had converged into a profound understanding of living with clarity and freedom. Today, Liang realized was not about mastering a single principle, but about integrating all of them. The river, a constant yet ever-changing teacher, mirrored life itself. Fluid, unpredictable, and full of both beauty and challenge. To live in the flow was to embrace the impermanent nature of existence, to meet every moment with awareness, and to respond rather than react. Flowing with awareness, Liang began by observing the world around him. The river reflected the sky, clouds drifting lazily across the horizon, and the occasional fish breaking the surface with a silvery splash. Each sensory experience was vivid and immediate, yet he did not cling. He felt the warmth of the sun, the caress of the wind, the gentle sway of the boat, but he did not try to possess these sensations. Awareness alone, without attachment, allowed him to experience life fully without being overwhelmed. He reflected on how often humans resist what arises in life, attempting to control outcomes, predict the future, or fix the past. This resistance, he realized, was the source of most suffering. Anger, frustration, anxiety, all emerged not from the events themselves, but from a mind's insistence that life conform to its expectations. By observing without clinging, by letting life flow rather than forcing it, he discovered a liberation that had nothing to do with changing the world and everything to do with changing his relationship to it. Embracing empty boats everywhere, Liang recalled the empty boats he had seen throughout his journey. Each one, whether a literal vessel or a metaphor for conflict and misunderstanding, had taught him the same lesson. Much of suffering arises from projection and attachment. Today, he saw that this principle applied to every interaction, every disturbance, and every challenge. People, situations, and circumstances were not inherently harmful. The mind's interpretations and judgments created the collision. Even now, as he passed other boats floating quietly on the river, he observed them without fear or irritation. He felt no need to act, react, or control. Each boat, empty yet real in its presence, was a reminder of the mind's capacity to impose meaning where none exists. He smiled inwardly, recognizing the freedom in simply observing. Compassion in action. Living in the flow was not merely a matter of awareness, but also of compassion. Liang had learned to extend kindness to himself, to forgive past mistakes, and to meet his own emotions without judgment. Now he saw that this inner compassion naturally extended outward. Every person he encountered, every situation that once provoked anger or frustration, could now be met with patience, understanding, and empathy. He reflected on previous conflicts that had caused long-term resentment. The anger he once carried toward colleagues, friends, and family had mirrored the judgment he held for himself. By embracing self-compassion, he had begun to dissolve these external conflicts. The understanding that everyone navigates life on their own empty boats allowed him to respond with gentleness rather than hostility, to communicate with clarity rather than defensiveness, and to act from presence rather than reaction. Letting life flow, Liang realized that living in the flow required surrender, not passive resignation, but active acceptance of impermanence and change. Life's currents are unpredictable, plans are inevitably disrupted, expectations unmet, and desires unfulfilled. By clinging to outcomes or resisting what arises, one invites suffering. By surrendering to the flow, one experiences life with freshness, flexibility, and resilience. He practiced this surrender with both body and mind. When the river curved sharply or the wind shifted direction, he allowed the boat to respond naturally, adjusting his movements with ease. Similarly, in the currents of life, he allowed events to unfold, trusting that awareness, compassion, and skillful response would guide him. Surrender, he realized, is not weakness, it is strength tempered by wisdom. The interplay of awareness, compassion, and release. Liang reflected on the journey that had brought him to this point. Awareness had revealed the nature of empty boats, showing him that conflict is largely an internal creation. Compassion had softened the mind, teaching him to treat himself and others with kindness. Letting go of the past had released burdens that weighed down his spirit. All of these practices, integrated, created a harmonious flow, a life lived with clarity, freedom, and serenity. He understood that the river's metaphor extended beyond moments of conflict. Every experience, joy, sorrow, success, failure, was part of the same flow. By observing without clinging, meeting life with compassion, and releasing attachment to the past, one could navigate life with skill and grace. Each moment became an opportunity to practice, an opportunity to deepen understanding, and an opportunity to live fully. Responding rather than reacting, Liang noticed how naturally his responses had changed. In the past, he might have reacted with irritation to a sudden disturbance, snapping at a minor inconvenience or letting a small offense grow into prolonged anger. Now, he paused before responding, allowing awareness to guide his actions. Even when confronted with challenges, he could act from presence rather than habit. His mind remained calm, his heart open, and his body relaxed. The emptiness of the boats he once feared now became a field of possibility. Each collision an invitation to practice patience, understanding, and equanimity. Integrating flow into daily life, Liang knew that the river was not separate from life. It was a reflection of it. The same principles applied to relationships, work, and daily experiences. Interruptions, mistakes, misunderstandings, and conflicts could all be approached with the same awareness and compassion cultivated on the river. He envisioned living each day as if drifting gently along a river, noticing each passing boat without clinging, each wave of emotion without judgment, each challenge as an opportunity to practice presence. The flow of life, once resisted, could now be embraced as a teacher and companion. The joy of presence, the river's beauty, once merely observed with the eyes, was now felt deeply in every fiber of Liang's being. The sunlight sparkling on the water, the rustle of reeds, the distant call of a bird, all were experienced fully, without grasping, without distraction, without expectation. Presence itself became a source of joy. He understood that joy is not dependent on circumstances, but on the quality of attention and the openness of the heart. By living in the flow, one experiences life directly, moment by moment, free from the distortions of judgment, attachment, or memory. Freedom in the flow. Liang felt a profound sense of liberation. Empty boats no longer provoked fear or anger. Past grievances no longer weighed him down. Awareness and compassion guided his actions, and surrender allowed him to move with the river rather than struggle against it. He realized that living in the flow is not a destination, but a continuous practice. Every moment offers an opportunity to notice, to release, to act with clarity, and to extend compassion. Each experience, whether challenging or pleasant, becomes part of the journey, part of the learning, part of the unfolding of consciousness. The final insight, as the sun dipped lower, casting long reflections across the water, Liang felt the culmination of his journey. The lessons of the empty boats, the inner collisions, the self-compassion, the release of the past, all had converged into a living wisdom. Life itself was the teacher, and he had learned to navigate it with skill, patience, and an open heart. He understood at last that peace is not found in controlling the river, in avoiding collisions, or in eliminating challenges. Peace is found in flowing with life, responding with awareness, embracing with compassion, and letting go of all that no longer serves the present moment. Liang leaned back in his boat, feeling the gentle current beneath him, the wind on his face, and the warmth of the sun on his skin. The river carried him onward, and he moved with it, free, open, and alive. Living in the flow was not an abstract principle. It was the art of being fully present, fully human, and fully awake. Every moment became sacred, every encounter an opportunity, every ripple a reminder of life's impermanence, interconnectedness, and beauty. And in that profound flow, Liang realized the ultimate truth. The river, the empty boats, the currents of life, all were not obstacles but teachers. To live fully is to navigate them with awareness, compassion, and surrender. And when one does, the heart is free, the mind is clear, and the spirit soars. Liang closed his eyes, smiling, letting the river guide him into the endless horizon. In the flow, he had found home.